Hello and welcome back to the AGRIMINDS podcast. This is Kacee Bohle, and I am going to be joined by somebody who's going to help me answer all of your burning questions today about therapy in the agriculture industry. Colleen Stegenga, welcome to the AGRIMINDS podcast.
Thanks, Casey. I am excited to be here.
If anybody has ever heard me talk about therapy or counseling or anything like that, I know you've probably had the same questions that I have. And today, I hope that we can get some of those answered. I am super excited. I've known Colleen for, has it been like 2 years now? 3 years, I think. We've been following each other on social media for a while. We've bounced around some ideas. We've worked together on a couple of projects. And I've absolutely been in awe about the depth of conversation around mental health within the agriculture industry. And so I'm really excited to maybe bust some myths, answer some questions, provide a couple of tips and techniques that you can use if you're feeling some anxiety, frustration, things like that. So I'm excited to dive in. Would you mind telling people a little bit about who you are, where you're at, what your official title is?
No, you bet. I'm happy to do that. So, my official title is a licensed social worker, but I am a licensed social worker who does therapy. And I have my own private practice. I am located in South Dakota. I am, let me think here, going on year 7 of my private practice. I have been in the field for about 13 years. Kind of I don't know, a later in life awakening, I guess you could say. I had been working at a very high needs elementary school in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and it was that job where I made the decision to go back to school. Um, I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that I wanted to somehow find a way to either help bring resources or solutions to people who were being challenged. And here I am. I am running a private practice of my own. And the funny thing is that 4 months ago, my husband and I just relocated back to where I grew up. So I'm on a little acreage south of Mount Vernon, South Dakota. I'm guessing not many of you know where that is. And I'm 5 miles away from where I actually grew up. Never in a million years did I think I'd come home, but it's funny how things change, and we love being out on the farm. We love being close to where I grew up. We love being close to my siblings, and, I'm excited for what that's gonna do for my business, for my practice.
I would love to just dive right into what is therapy? What is counseling? Who is it for? Why do people need it? Who needs it?
Absolutely. What is therapy? Boy, therapy for many people is a lifeline. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people wait until life hands them some really, really critical circumstances and they don't know how to make sense of it. And so then a lot of times, by the time I see a client for the first time, they're going through a major life change or an adjustment, a death in the family. They're at a crisis point. And I think, through the years, as we've evolved with talking about mental health and wellness and getting rid of stigma and getting services that are accessible, maybe that's how it was originally intended. But I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves if we don't start changing that around. I think therapy needs to be considered more of like a maintenance agreement that you make with yourself, or kind of like a little bit of a lifeline, but not in an emergency sense, in of just help me function daily. Um, I would love to see people start treating therapy and mental health practices just like that, maintenance. Especially when we look at, farmers and ranchers and their life on the farm. They put a lot of thought, care, and maintenance into their equipment and their animals and their land. and their family members. But then when it comes to taking care of themselves, that's kind of last thing on the list, right? Um, but that's not how it should be. If you want to have good, healthy, productive land, if you want to have good, healthy, productive cattle, if you want the whole operation to be healthy and productive, it starts with you, the farmer, the rancher, the person kind of in charge. And so how do you get to that point? It's not just physical health. You have to have all of it combined, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I really hope that somewhere in my lifetime I can see that start to come around a little bit more.
We talked about like what is therapy? Who is it for?
It's for everybody. It's for anybody. Therapists need therapists. Clergymen need therapists. Everybody can use a therapist. And it's not because you're not capable or because you're broken. It's because, again, we're looking at just taking care of ourselves, having that regular routine maintenance. Kind of like when we're supposed to see our doctors, right? Annually, have all the lab tests run, make sure that we're functioning at optimal level. You could think of that as well for doing therapy. Mentally, am I running at the optimal level? How are my stress levels? Am I sleeping? Am I eating? Um, How's my mood? Am I more irritable than normal with my loved ones? Or am I avoiding or isolating from doing things I normally would do? Like all of those things play into our mental health and wellness. And having a therapist on speed dial is a really, I think, healthy and beneficial way to have that optimal health.
I've mentioned this in the past couple of episodes where I think the conversation around mental health within agriculture is, yeah, this is a stressful industry. The being a farmer, rancher, producer of some sort, just working in the ag industry is hard on our mental health. And the conversation goes from it's hard to, oh, you're feeling like giving up. Here's the suicide hotline. And it's like there's so much conversation that can happen in between those points. And I know so many people who, like you said, there's a death in the family or a divorce or something tragic has happened, they go bankrupt on the farm, whatever it is, something tragic happens, and then they seek therapy because, like, that's
Right.
kind of the next step. And I just love the idea of how do we instill these conversations, these processes, these thought patterns, these tools, these resources to help people before an accident happens because it's inevitable that life is gonna life. You know what I mean? Like, it's inevitable that something going to happen, whether it is a breakdown in the middle of the field when we least expect it, whether it is our partner leaving us, whether it is a child having a learning disability that is something we didn't mentally have prepared. And it's just pulling so much of our energy and our time and our resources. Whatever the thing is, it's like life is gonna life. How can we go into those situations not expecting the worst to happen, but just knowing like I'd love for things to go smoothly, but if not, I've got myself in check well enough to know I can handle it and I can ride through that storm. There's a couple of questions that people have brought to my attention when I mentioned I was going to be bringing a therapist onto the podcast, and they said, here's what I want them to answer. So, can we go through some of these questions and maybe just help me myth bust or provide a little bit of light into these areas that are unknown to people in the agriculture industry?
Bet. I'll do my best to answer these questions.
The very first question that was submitted is, how do I know if I need it? And you answered that a little bit just a minute ago of around like if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling burnt out, if there's something tragic, but are there some signs that say, "Hey, this is where you should probably seek a therapist," or, this is where it may make sense to go to an actual like a physician or a health doctor, or is this a coach question? Like,
Right.
what are the signs that a therapist is the right route?
Right. So kind of what I talked about earlier, but let's have you kind of take a little self assessment, right? Take a look at your life over the last couple weeks. Where would you rank your stress levels? If your stress levels are ranking consistently at a 7 or higher, that's probably a good indication you need to go talk to somebody. If you haven't been sleeping very well consistently for the last week to 2 weeks, that's another warning sign. Your appetite is off. You either are overeating or you're having to force yourself to eat. Maybe you notice that you're snapping at your kids more or your spouse more. If you find that the occasional after work cocktail turns into a daily ritual, like you have to have some of those cocktails to get through the day, that's a very big red flag right there that you need to go in and talk to somebody. If you find you're avoiding things or not participating in things that you typically used to enjoy, or it's maybe even hard to get yourself out of bed in the morning, those would be some other symptoms that would indicate it's time to go talk to somebody. And of course, if you would have that thought, like, I just don't care anymore. I don't want to live. I don't want to be here. What's the point? Then to me, that's the flashing red light, urgent, like you need to get in today to talk to somebody.
Yeah, I feel like I live with many of those signs or symptoms daily. Like I do,
We
and
live in a
I
stressful
attribute
world.
I do, and I feel like I don't even have it as bad as other people, and still I'm like, "Yep, yep, yep," to every single thing you listed off. Got that, got that, got that. So, obviously, I need to go see a therapist, but is there a difference between a therapist and a counselor?
I think it depends on a little bit on your state licensing requirements and like the boards that govern your licenses. I think they would say yes, there is a difference. Um, in my realm of the world, I think we're all kind of about the same. We all help you get to the root of your problem and we help you find the solution. There are many different types of therapists slash counselors, depending upon what kind of training we've all taken or our specialized areas or the areas that we're interested in. So it just kind of depends on what you think you need assistance with.
What kinds of therapy are out there?
I specialize in, I'm a little bit of old school. I kind of like that old familiar cognitive behavioral therapy. Like, let's work on changing some of your thoughts because a lot of times our thoughts can control our actions and run away with us. So I do a lot of that old fashioned CBT. Sometimes, if people are really struggling with anxiety and depression and they can't seem to get through some normal functioning, we might look at adding in a little bit of DBT, which is a dialectical behavior therapy. And originally, that was introduced for people who struggle with substance use and abuse, but they have found it to be very successful with helping with our emotions, managing our emotions, and reducing some of those symptoms too of anxiety and depression. Recently, I just was trained in a trauma therapy. It's called accelerated resolution therapy. And what I love about that is we don't have to go through and hash out all of the details of the specific traumatic event. We are simply going to work together identifying images, sensations in the body, and then we're going to add in bilateral eye movements and store those images in a different manner so that you are not feeling as traumatized or triggered as you were. And the other beautiful part about that is that sometimes it might only take one session, 3 sessions, 4 sessions, versus maybe going through therapy for a couple of years, unpacking some of the traumatic events. The other thing, I have been trained to utilize horses in therapy. That's a beautiful thing because sometimes we don't have to do a lot of talking in that either. The horses are so good at their job and they don't even know that they're doing it, but they mirror our image, they mirror our emotions. And so sometimes if I have a client who is working with a horse, that horse will behave in a way that will bring up whatever's bothering that person. it'll bring it up to the top, and then that will be a whole new point that if they feel like talking about it, we can, and they hadn't even realized maybe that something of that nature was bothering them. I'm excited to get back into doing the horses and hopefully incorporating a few more animals once we get things situated on our farm. But those are kind of the main ones that I do, but there are a host of other therapies. There's another trauma therapy called EMDR that also helps with reprocessing images from traumatic events. I think there are some people who use like somatic, do things to help with somatic symptoms, or we maybe somatic movements that incorporate like tapping. Those are kind of the big ones that I know of, right, just off the top of my head.
I had no idea there were that many different types of therapy. And I think that that's awesome that there are so many options depending on what you're dealing with or what you could potentially be up against, right? We've talked about some different versions or focus areas, specialties, if you will. I think one of the most common comments that I got when I put that poll out there about like what would you ask a therapist was how do we get access to it? Because a lot of farmers and ranchers are struggling with the insurance game, right? They're paying out of pocket for certain things. They have high deductibles on other things. It's not covered by insurance if you go this route, and it is covered by insurance if you go that route. I mean, and I think that's one of the most intimidating parts is I don't wanna pay for something if I don't really need it. So being proactive and paying for the maintenance, like, like, what's the ROI here? What's the bottom line here?
But it most definitely will pay off because it's going to help them be more prepared should something come down the line that would necessitate a weekly or biweekly meeting with a therapist. Insurance, it's a tough game. Insurance, I feel like, just keeps getting more and more out of hand and out of control. And so I would stress to people listening and to clients anywhere, don't let that stop you from coming in. Many of us provide a sliding fee scale. Um, if your deductible is too high and you don't even think you'll use your insurance, you can opt out to not bill it through insurance. And many of us also use like a cash rate. So if you don't want to use insurance, then we offer a cash rate. This is what it is. Some of us, if you talk about it and it's an issue for you and you need to set up like maybe a payment plan, we can do that. Um, some farm programs will run a voucher system and will donate like, I don't know, 3 to 6 free sessions of therapy with specific therapists. Now, that runs independent. I mean, pretty much each state does their own thing, and you would just have to ask some questions and maybe call some hotlines to find out who has access to the vouchers, but that's another way to look at getting some services. Um, I know like AgriSafe, I think they have a provider directory. I don't know that they offer any free counseling, but don't quote me on that. But AgriSafe provides a directory where you can look up therapists. There's another business that I'm associated with. It's the National Farmer Mental Health Alliance. They're based out of Canada, but we have just recently, we're working to expand into the US. And it's a training program so we can get more therapists trained in the terminology, the technology, anything related to farm and ranch, just so that if they don't have that exposure, but they know they're going to be working with farmers and ranchers, they'll feel more comfortable, which will then enable the farmers and ranchers to feel more comfortable with them. They also have a provider directory. So there's resources. You just have to get a little bit creative when you're looking for them.
Yeah, that was another question that I think so many people are intimidated by working with a therapist because they're like, what if they don't understand what I'm going through? Are they actually going to be beneficial because do they get what I'm going through? Like, do they understand the pressures, the generational, the legacy, the markets, all the things that I have to deal with when I'm in this industry? And so I would love to hear more about this ag informed therapy that you were just talking about. What does that mean?
So it's a training course. I think if I'm remembering right, we have 4 levels or 4 tiers of training, and right now the training is all based on the Canadian history, the research, the statistics. It's all based on the Canadian background. I am working to help incorporate the US history, statistics, research, and background so that we can then have a US side of the training. It's self paced, it's all taught online. And so to me, that was beautiful because whenever I had some downtime within my daily schedule, I could jump on and cover a couple topics because it's very in depth. There's a lot of information there, which is good. It not only looks at research, statistics, history, it brings in some of the modalities that might be helpful when talking with farmers and ranchers. It brings in possible scenarios like succession planning or a death in the family or maybe a family member that has some substance use issues. And so it's good to help you kind of think through, what would I do or how would I handle that if I did have a client present with some of those issues? It's just a very thorough background. And so I found it really, really worth my time. Even though it was the Canadian statistics, it's so very similar. You can't escape the issues that farmers and ranchers face. We might be different countries, but everybody's dealing with, input costs. Everybody's dealing with the market piece and, legacy and how do I make a go of it, and what if I don't have anybody that wants to take over when I retire? Like, that stuff doesn't change regardless of your area that you live. So, it's very worthwhile, and so that's part of my job too this year is to get out and get more US counselors and therapists to take that training so that we can have more people that are agriculturally informed and then makes more available counselors to help farmers and ranchers.
You mentioned something about like different states having different requirements. Like you're not able to work with everybody in every state. Like there are specific states you can have clients in. Is that right?
Every state has a licensing board. And so right now I'm licensed in South Dakota and North Dakota. We have been working to get a compact that would allow us to cross state lines without all of the red tape so that we can cross state lines when people call for help. I've had people reach out from multiple states and I've had to turn them away because unfortunately, I don't have the license in that state. But if I do get a phone call, I work really hard to find a resource for them or a place to direct them because I don't like the thought that I can't help them. They reach out and then I can't do anything. That bothers me. I had a person reach out, across state lines, and this person had waited, oh gosh, he was probably close to retirement age, and, saw one of my articles in one of the magazines that I write for, and said that, something popped up. He knew that he needed to get some help, but he didn't know where to start. Like, it's so overwhelming. How do I start this at my age? So I remembered your article. I looked you up. I hope that's okay. Could you be my counselor? And I said, gosh, unfortunately, I can't. I don't have a license in your state, but tell me a little bit about what's going on and maybe I can give you some direction. So um, he shared that he was a veteran and had done, I think, 3 or 4 tours overseas and had never processed any of his active duty. Just came out of service, went back to farming, went back to life. And some of those tours w- you know, wreaked a little havoc on him, and something popped up that needed to be addressed. And so, um, the direction I gave him was to contact his physician, make an appointment. That's kind of your first place to start if you don't know therapy wise where to start. It sounded like mostly dealing with some post traumatic stress disorder. And so then I had suggested that he ask his physician for a couple referrals for somebody who specializes in PTSD. and that at least that would be a good place to start. So he was very thankful. Hadn't thought of that before. Didn't even occur that, well, yeah, maybe my family doctor could help me. And I said, the doctors typically give out those assessments now looking for depression and anxiety symptoms. I said, it's really important that you answer those honestly when you take them, and then fill him in on what's been going on, and he can guide you. So, I mean, I think it turned out okay. He did call me back, gosh, 3 or 4 months later. Actually, he didn't call, he sent me an email and said, "Hey, I hope it's okay, I'm checking in, but I just kinda wanted to let you know where things are at and that I do feel better, and I did get a little bit of help," and, again, thanking me for being able to direct him. So, I mean, I count that as something.
Yeah, that's a big win. I notice that sometimes with me too, even as a coach, like somebody will reach out and they'll be like, "This is what I'm looking for." And I I don't mind helping people with other parts of life. Like I like to help the human. That's kind of my specialty as a coach
Yep,
is I want to help you as a human. And sometimes they're like, "I need you to help me build my business," or "I need you to help me with this." And it's like, that I don't really, like, zone in on those things, but I know somebody else who is really good at being a coach in that specific thing. And so I think being the gate getter instead of the gatekeeper there and saying like, "I can't help you, sorry, best of luck," and then just,
right.
figure it out on your own. I think as an industry that's so important and admirable of you to just be like, I can't legally help you because my hands are tied with the system, but here's what I would suggest you doing next, or here's a referral." And, I've put a couple of posts on LinkedIn about like, if you are in this industry and, you're in the mental health side of things, comment and put your information or a resource, something, because gosh, it's such a short life, and there's so many people that need help and only this many resources. And so at the end of the
Right.
day, yes, we would love to have that client, right? As a business owner, we would love to have their business and to
Mhm.
help them. But there are so many times where it's like, I know that it would benefit us both and you'd be better off going this direction. And so that just speaks volumes to the type of person you are and just how much you genuinely care about other people's well-being. So I just commend you for that. I think that's wonderful. So we've talked about what a counselor and a therapist is, the signs that maybe therapy is the right next step for you, how to access therapists, whether it's through insurance or finding one on your own. I would love if you could give listeners just a little bit of a glimpse as to the power of some of the tools, resources, and techniques that you have on your Instagram specifically. I notice you do mental health tip Mondays, and even on LinkedIn, you're always sharing articles and posts about things that can help people when they're feeling anxious, when they're feeling overwhelmed, when their thoughts are spiraling, when they feel hopeless, or just, hey, here's some things to help you be proactive. Or maybe you're not dealing with anything right now, but you know somebody in your life who is. Here's how you can support them. Would you mind sharing a grounding tip or just something that people can use today to just help them through something that they're dealing with? And just maybe it's just catch a breath or help them be present in some way.
Simplest one, and I utilize this one myself. Truth be told, I have a thing about going to the dentist, and it will take me into a panic attack sometimes. And so I do a grounding technique. It's just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so wherever you are, just look around. Like if I'm in the dentist chair, I'll just use myself as an example. Look around and I pick out, okay, what are 5 red things in this office? And then I just go down the list. Okay, now I want to see, are there 4 things that I can smell? And I identify those in my head. 3 things that I can touch or feel. Um, 2 things that I hear, and then maybe 1 thing I taste. And typically by the time, I'm at the peak of that panic or that anxiety, by the time I get to 1, it's dissipated because it helps distract your brain from that stressful moment, and I know it sounds really simple, but it works. So, that's the one I probably recommend the most when you find yourself in that spiral or that moment of panic. The other thing too, like if you are really struggling, like change of seasons and it's so dark and we don't get enough sunlight and you don't want to get out of bed, you know what? Give yourself 5 minutes and then push yourself out. Like, nope, I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna get dressed. Change your scenery. Don't just sit in your bedroom all day, or don't just sit I don't know, maybe in the cab of your tractor. Change your scenery, and you will be amazed at just even that small change, what it can do for your perspective. Don't isolate. Like if you know you're feeling down and you're struggling with your mood, don't isolate. You have to find somebody to talk to, whether that's your spouse, your hired hand, the neighbor down the road, your pastor. Like, get out of your head. I think sometimes we just get so stuck in our ways. Um, and you're not alone. Like, I don't know anybody who doesn't go through moments where they're feeling a little bit down or they're having a hard time finding motivation. You're not alone. I think that's the biggest thing for getting out of your head. The other thing, anything to do with deep breathing can also kind of help you reset your nervous system. So, the one that I recommend the most is 4-7-8. And so what you do is you inhale and you hold it, or as you inhale, you count to 4. You hold it for the count of 7, and then you exhale to the count of 8. And you do that for as many times as you need to. And I'm trying to think like what's a good average number, maybe 4 or 5 times. And that can be enough to kind of help you also reset some of those anxieties that are running rampant in your body. So those are just a few off the top of my head.
Yeah, I love all of those things. I have heard like using the elevator as the example, right? Like imagine you're on the 4th floor and breathe in for 4 to go up to the 8th level and then breathe out all the way down till you get to the bottom floor. Like there's just so many different visualizations. And I think I've shared this one too before. My my son's teacher actually shared this with me before we ended up pulling him out of school is put your palm up and breathe in as you trace your thumb, breathe out as you trace the back of your thumb, breathe in, and just giving your mind something to touch and feel and focus on. Like those are some really good grounding techniques. I love that. And you mentioned something about, like, changing your scenery. I personally have done that too. I mean, if you look in the background, I'm in my basement. There's no windows down here. I'm sitting under fluorescent lighting,
Right.
and there are days where it's like I forget what time it is. I have no idea if it's storming outside. I could be Dorothy in Kansas. I have no idea what's happening upstairs. And then there are days where it's like I just decide like to take my computer, go to the coffee shop or go to a park or even just upstairs into the living room and just changing your scenery, because I know sometimes, like, not all of us in agriculture are in the pickup or the semi truck or the cab of a tractor. Some of us are in the office doing work too. Some of us are in a pickup truck going down the interstate. And so, like, changing the type of music you're listening to, changing the temperature in the vehicle, anything to just get you out of whatever you're in, right? Like I had to roll the window down a lot just to get some fresh air because I was in a funk, and just like opening the sunroof, even if it's like 2 degrees outside, just to like give you that like blast of fresh air. Even just for a second, like just freeze it out for a second and then it will change so much inside of you. It's amazing. And so I really appreciate those tips. And I know that Greg's going to be doing a breathwork session at the AgriMind Summit. So I would love to invite y'all to come out and experience the breathwork session and learn how to take deep breaths, because honestly, like I didn't realize it, but I was not taking deep breaths from my belly, my diaphragm. I was breathing right here. And that's just not like helpful as it could be if you took deep intentional breaths. So I'm a big fan of the breath work. I talk about it all the time. So double tapping on that one. Thank you so much for sharing that. Any other final words or things that you wish you could tell someone who has never experienced therapy or might be like on the fence? Any final like words of encouragement that you would share with somebody who hasn't really experienced the benefits of seeking help in this way?
You know, if you're really on the fence and you just don't know how to go about finding someone, um, word of mouth is a great source. Ask a friend, ask somebody that you trust and you have a good relationship with, like, hey, you know, do you know anybody? Have you heard of anybody? A lot of times too, you can get some really good recommendations that way. And the beauty is that when you start with a therapist, if you don't click and if you don't mesh, it's okay. You don't have to stay. Um, when I'm going through the paperwork with my new clients, I stress that to their face. Like, you're not going to offend me. This isn't about me. This is about you and making sure you get what you need. Please, please, please tell me if you don't think this is going to work, and I can help find you someone who might be a better fit. It's very seldom that people actually take me up on that, but I wish that they would because sometimes it takes a while to get in with a therapist. And if you have a recommendation or somebody has said, hey, you need to go here, like it might move you along a little quicker. You just don't know. Um, and as far as the relationship, I'd say the relationship is probably almost the most important factor between you and the therapist. It has to be somebody that you're comfortable with, that gets you, that understands what you're living. Just because you're in therapy now for this season of life doesn't mean that you're going to be there forever. I mean, it certainly could, but we have to follow the regulations set forth by the insurance companies. And if you aren't meeting the criteria, then therapy isn't really necessary anymore. But here's the beautiful thing, we pause, I keep your file open, and 5 years down the road, if you feel like I need a refresher, you call me up, you come back in. So it doesn't have to be long term. It's just for that season of life.
Yeah, I think that's so important to note too, because I think a lot of the hesitations are like, once I start, like, it's just going to unpack all this stuff. And I'm just like always forever going to be unlearning or traumatizing myself. And like, I'm never going to graduate from quote unquote therapy. So I love that you mentioned that too.
But you will. You definitely will. The key is to not be afraid to do the unpacking. That's what's going to bring the change and the growth. It's worth it.
That's so good. I know that it's intimidating and I know that it can be scary, especially if it's something that you've never experienced or nobody in your life has experienced. I mean, I come from a long line of stubborn folks and, you know, they'll figure it out on their own, right? But I think it's important and I've personally experienced therapy for myself and not for long periods of time. It's just, I just need somebody to vent to, like, give me one session or, you know, it just, while we're getting through this thing, one date happens or until this thing is over, I just want to make sure I've got somebody in my corner. And, you know, when I always talk about like the difference between coaching and therapy, the terminology that I've used that has kind of been taught to me by the institute that I got certified in is that coaching is more so like we're taking into consideration what you've gone through and where do you want to go with that, and we're helping you move forward. Whereas therapy is more so like there might be an open wound or some scar tissue that needs some looking at, and we're gonna work on what you've gone through. And so I that we can kind of like find this overlap of there may be a season where you may need both a coach and a therapist because there's stuff that is holding you back from going. forward. And so you don't want to let go of the things you're working towards, but there might be one or two areas that's just hanging on. It's like if we can just sort that one thing out, then we can go forward. And so I do have a couple of clients that work with me and a therapist at the same time for different areas of their life. And so I don't think it has to be an either or. It doesn't have to be a forever. And I also think for me personally, I've had multiple different coaches throughout my career. Some of them were business coaches, some of them were personal coaches, a health coach. I mean, like, it just depends on the season of life that I'm in, depends on the type of coach I'm looking for. And it sounds like the same can be true with the type of therapist that you work with is depending on what you're going through. You may say, I can relate to this person better for this area of my life, and I may relate to this person in this challenge that I'm facing. And so having a couple of different options vetted depending on what you're going through, I think is a little bit of work, but I think that intentionality is going to be so impactful and worth it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us all things therapy. And I know that this is a topic that's still being learned and talked about in the ag industry specifically. And so I just appreciate you letting me kind of kind of drill you here for a second.
That's all right.
If people want to work with you specifically, where can they find you?
They can go to my website. It's embracingchangecs.com. And I'm also listed on Psychology Today. And I think I'm listed still with the AgriSafe Network and with the National Farmers Mental Health Alliance.
Thank you so much again for taking the time to be on with us today. And hopefully, this has been beneficial in helping people understand what therapy is, how can it be accessed, who it would benefit, and how it can hopefully help you be proactive and not always reactive in the things that you're dealing with in your life and career.